Again, good morning, grade 10. We are still in the continuation of our topic, right? So let's move now. We discussed nutrient cycle last meeting, right? I'll just give you a recap. In ecosystem, living organisms need energy and other chemical nutrients. Energy lost, okay, is lost to the environment as it moves from one trophic level to the next, but eventually replenished by the sun through the process of photosynthesis. This explains why energy is that in this natural process is considered to be a one-way process. Okay, when you say one-way process again, once you consume the energy, you cannot actually what? Put it back. Remember the concept of thermodynamics, the law of thermodynamics, as what I am telling you a while ago, the last discussion, that energy cannot be created nor destroyed, but you can transform it from one form to another. So this is now the energy conversion or transformation from chemical energy going to mechanical, going to thermal, going to chemical again, and so on. Okay. Since the supply of chemical nutrients in the environment is very limited, this is really very limited, they must be recycled repeatedly. Okay. Rainfall, carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen are some examples of chemical nutrients that go through the recycling process. Okay. We need to recycle them because we have a limited supply of those, right? There are times when the nutrients cycle rapidly is very rapid in an ecosystem or occur rather slowly and may be tied up like in soil and rocks in the ocean or in the air. Okay. Sometimes again, it may be speed up because of our activities, or it may be tied up in those rocks, in the fossils. Yes, they can be. An example of latter can be found in the aquatic ecosystem. Okay. Carbon deposits on shell produced by marine organisms such as your clams, your your crustaceans. Okay. Remember that their outer cover is composed of carbon deposits and calcium. Okay. They eventually turn into limestones. The limestone may remain undisturbed and intact for millions of years. Right? Question so far? Please turn on your camera. Question so far? Everybody?
None, sir.
In the terrestrial ecosystem, nutrients are constantly recycled. Yes, plants considered as the producers in the terrestrial ecosystem need nutrients to grow. Okay, these nutrients come from the breakdown of rocks and the decaying organic matter. The decomposers, by the way, acts on it to recycle the nutrients from this dead organic matter. Rainfall and water are necessary for the weathering of rocks and erosion and the fast decomposition of plants and animals. Take note that if there is rainfall, there is what? Water. And water gives a moisture to the dead organic matter for the fast decomposition. So that the decomposers can actually recycle, can actually return the nutrients from the dead organic matter. Okay. The nutrients are then taken in by the roots of the incorporated into the plant's tissues. Animals that fed on plant acquire the nutrients too and return them to the soil when they die. So that is actually the process. Okay. Let's move now to the processes. What are these processes? Let's have the carbon cycle. Carbon is the major ingredient of all organic molecules, including us. We are actually made of carbon. The movement of carbon in the environment is done through the process called carbon cycle. Okay. When carbon is attached to two molecules of oxygen, it becomes carbon dioxide or CO2. Okay. Carbon dioxide is given off by humans, animals, and factory emissions. It is captured by plants to serve as a raw material for photosynthesis. Okay. Carbon dioxide is not only captured by terrestrial plants, but also by marine plants as dissolved CO2. Okay? There are more dissolved CO2 in the oceans compared to CO2 in the atmosphere. Take note that this CO2 can be dissolved in water. Okay? Once dissolved, this will be used by what? By some of the organisms living there. Decomposers that fed on dead consumers release carbon dioxide back in the atmosphere and the bodies of water through cellular respiration. On the larger scale, the return of CO2 to the atmosphere by respiration closely balances its removal by photosynthesis. It should be a balance. Because of the increased burning and production of coal and fossil fuels, your petroleum, the levels of carbon dioxide is continuously rising. Okay, there's no balance there, which a cause of a significant problem in the global system. We called it as global warming. Okay, because there is no balance between the emission, okay, the emission and consumption of CO2, is CO2 is trapped in the atmosphere. Remember that your CO2 is a greenhouse gas. Okay, are you familiar with greenhouse effect already? Had we discussed greenhouse effect? Yes. Greenhouse effect, this causes a major effect in the greenhouse effect, the carbon emission or the CO2 emission, carbon dioxide emission. So as you can see, again, we can actually see here the process, okay? We actually emit CO2 by cellular respiration, okay? We also emit CO2 by using the carbon, the deposits, fuel deposits, combustion of fuel, fossils, okay? And of course, the CO2 will be used by plants for photosynthesis in the light-independent reactions, okay? But then again, take note, there are a lot of organisms expelling CO2 in the atmosphere. We are also making it faster. We use the fossil fuels. So the factories now is emitting a lot of CO2. Tendency is there is no balance there. Okay. And of course, we do cutting of trees. So again, there's no balance there. Tendency is the CO2 will be trapped in the atmosphere and will create global warming. Okay. This will create a build up of greenhouse gases, the CO2 gases, which now create global warming. Let's move now to water cycle. Water is one of the most vital components in any environment. In fact, when you're talking about water cycle, it is actually the master cycle or the mother cycle because it starts everything. When water cycle starts, in the rest of the cycle will also start. Okay? Water cycle is one of the most vital components in an environment or ecosystem. It is essential to all forms of life, not only because organisms are composed mostly of water, but also water makes an environment habitable to almost all living things. We need water. In fact, our body is composed of 70% water. Some of the major processes driven by solar energy include evaporation, transpiration, and over the ocean, evaporation greatly exceeds precipitation. And precipitation, okay? Over the ocean, evaporation greatly exceeds precipitation. Over the land, precipitation greatly exceeds evaporation and transpiration. The excess precipitation creates bodies of surface waters, take note, such as lakes, rivers, and groundwater, all of which actually flows back to the sea, completing the water cycle. This is now what we call as the water cycle. The water cycle is a global scale because of the large bodies of water on Earth. Okay, if you're going to look at the water cycle, as you can see, okay, it started with evaporation, okay, condensation, and precipitation. After precipitation, it will go to the subsoil. Okay, infiltration occur, and the subsurface overflow or outflow will go now to the ocean, right? And the runoff from the mountains, also the water from the mountains will go down again to the ocean, and evaporation happens again. Okay, why? Sure. Why do you say so? That this is the master cycle. Okay, once there is precipitation, tendency is it touches a lot of surface runoff in higher lands. Okay, it carries a lot of nutrients. It carries a lot of water for surface runoff. After which, if there is some lightning, it fixes the nitrogen in the atmosphere. Take note that we cannot use nitrogen unless it is fixed. So it started everything. Okay. Disturbances such as human activities have greatly affected intercycle on a global scale in a number of significant ways. A major source of atmospheric water is transpiration from the dense vegetation, which is mainly seen in the rainforest. Okay, transpiration happens when water is converted into water vapor by plants. Okay, as you can see, early in the morning, if you are very observant with your plants, you can see water droplets coming from it is actually in the stomata, but then again, you can observe it in the tip of your leaves. Okay, which is mainly seen in the rainforest. The destruction of these forests, which occurred rapidly or occurs rapidly, will change the amount of water vapor in the air. Okay, effects of this can be felt when it comes to the sudden change of weather patterns. As you can see, we do before we can actually predict weather conditions, but then again, as of the moment, it is really hard for us to predict weather patterns. Why? Because there are some changes in climatic condition or climate change. Farming and irrigation also cause an alarming effect on water cycle due to the pumping of large amount of water or amount of underground water or water from the ground. Such practice can ultimately increase the rate of evaporation over land and can deplete groundwater supplies. We do also use groundwater, right? Like your um, pumps, okay? It actually extracts underground water or water from the ground. Let's move now to nitrogen cycle, okay? Nitrogen cycle or nitrogen is essential to overall structure and functions of an organism. In fact, we are also made up of nitrogen. In our genes, we are actually made up of nitrogenous base pairs. Okay, it is an ingredient of both protein and nucleic acids. In farming, it is known to be a crucial yet limited plant nutrient. It is limited because our atmosphere contains 78 nitrogen, and we cannot use that nitrogen unless it is fixed. Okay, this atmospheric nitrogen, however, is a form of rendered useless and unavailable to plants. Plants can only use nitrogen in the form of nitrate, the NO3, or ammonium, or NH4 ammonium. Such compounds can be made by soil, okay, by the action of bacteria from nitrites. Okay, it needs to be fixed by nitrogen fixing bacteria or lightning. Okay, nitrogen fixing bacteria are those organisms that live symbiotically in roots of beans and legumes. The atmospheric nitrogen is then converted into ammonium, which will be used by plants. Following the cycle that you can see that ammonium is then converted into nitrate by nitrifying bacteria, nitrification. Okay, ammonium is converted into nitrate, which is used by plants. The nitrate is then acquired by plants as the main source of nitrogen. This form of nitrogen is used by the plants to make protein and amino acids. The nitrogen is then available to the consumers. Again, take note that we cannot actually use nitrogen unless being fixed by these organisms or by the nitrogen fixing organisms. This is now the nitrogen cycle. As you can see, if there are some lighting, a lot of nitrogen is being fixed there. Nitrogen fixation happens, or the bacteria, a nitrogen fixing bacteria, can actually do the nitrogen fixation. After which, the nitrogen is being converted or fixed into ammonium. But then ammonium needs to be what? Fixed again by nitrification. Okay, it should be nitrified in order for the plants to use it. Okay, after which the plants will use the what? The nitrates from the nitrification process. And the nitrates now is available for plants to use. Afterwards, it will be used by plants for metabolic processes. And of course, it is now available for human consumption and other animal consumptions. That is the process. So this is really important. As you can see, it will just flow as is. Okay, this is now the pattern of nitrogen cycle. It needs to be fixed. Then the nitrogen in the atmosphere needs to be fixed in order for us to use it. Okay. Question so far? Question?
None.
Anybody?
None, sir.
None.
All right. Bacteria and fungi act as detritivores. Okay. Meaning to say, these are decomposers that eat dead organic matter, detritivores. They eat detritus, that is a dead organic matter, that compose nitrogen-containing corpses back to the ammonium or to ammonium, which then keeps the nitrogen available to plants. Another form of bacteria is called the nitrifers. Okay, helps complete the nitrogen cycle by converting soil nitrates into atmospheric nitrogen. As a large number of nitrogen cycle or cycling is seen in the inner cycle of the diagram. The thicker the arrow, okay, it actually gives you an implication that there are a lot of nitrates, nitrites, and ammonium that links to plant, animals, detritivores, nitrifying bacteria that can actually seen in the inner circle, the one that I'm telling you a while ago. Human activities have also affected the nitrogen cycle balance in many areas. Okay, the use of inorganic fertilizers are routinely applied in agricultural lands. The inorganic fertilizers, we need to say these are chemicals. The large amount of undissolved inorganic nitrogen compound deposits in the rivers and streams by sewage or sewages treatments facilities greatly affects the system of nitrogen cycle. This actually affects the nitrogen cycle. Okay. Crops and other lawn plants take up some of the nitrogen compounds, and the nitrifying bacteria convert it into atmospheric nitrogen. Okay. The use of chemical fertilizers, however, exceeds the soil's natural capacity to recycle. Thus, excess nitrogen compounds often enter streams, lakes, and undergrounds. So supposed to be, it should be fixed by the natural fixers or nitrogen fixing bacteria and other organisms. But then again, because of this, because of these chemical fertilizers, okay, the natural capacity of the soil to recycle exceeds. So tendency is, where does this nitrogen go? It will go to streams, lakes, or underground. Okay, such practices can cause groundwater pollution. Okay, nitrates from drinking water, which are converted into nitrite, can be toxic to human digestive tract. Yes, correct. Nutrient cycle and stability. How can we stabilize ecosystem by this? Okay, what is our chances of stability when it comes to the nutrient cycle in an ecosystem? All ecosystems have their own structure. Yes, apparently they are comprised or composed of elements and different parts which are arranged in many ways that help them function. Okay, these functions include the nutrient cycle or recycling and the ecosystem stability. Okay, human activities play a huge role in the disturbances of the balance in the system. As you can see, what have you observed? Okay, always human activity disturb the nature itself. An ecosystem must be resistant, okay, and resilient to these sudden changes, whether human-made or caused by nature, and return to their natural state. Okay, diversity in one's ecosystem helps maintain the stability as the ecosystem becomes more resistant to change and disturbance. Diversity. When it comes to diversity, when an ecosystem becomes diverse, there are a lot of organisms living there for survival. There are a lot of autotrophs living there to feed or to give nourishment to the heterotrophs. Okay. Resiliency in farming. Okay. A more concrete example of stability is seen in our farming system. Okay. Throughout the years, increased demand for food and other farm-related products have caused great strain in the ecological system. Conventional farming or the modern agriculture such as monoculture, the production of single crop or farm product, has been adopted to use and used to meet the needs of the increasing demand for farm goods. Such practice has resulted in a large scale efficiency in food production with the expense of ecological damage and loss of biological diversity. Okay? Resilience and stability are very important in the farming industry. Okay? When it comes to resiliency, this is the ability of organisms to respond and recover from the natural or induced disturbances. Meaning to say, we conserve. These are conservatories. Okay? Studies have shown that the several farming practices can help conserve crop and animal diversity. Practices such as organic and sustainable farming and agroecology, the science of applying ecological concepts and principles in the design of management of sustainable agroecosystems, are just some of these examples. Okay, there are a lot of practices here. I have seen one in Bohol. No, they have eco farming. They call it eco farming. They created a sustainable um crop system which they use all natural. Okay, all natural um vegetations. They use all natural also uh, chemicals, but not into large scale nitrates and nitrites. They use their own chemicals in the process. They use humus in the process. So that will be a good resilience, and of course, which will make stability in the ecosystem. These farming practices have been greatly increased biodiversity not only among plants but also among predators, okay, pollinators and decomposers. These species have been very important critical function role in the agroecosystem, which is dynamic associations of crops, livestock, other flora and fauna. Flora means plants, fauna means animals, soil, water, and atmosphere, of course. Are you still with me? Are you still with me? MD, Margie, Dimitri? Okay. This is a quite long topic simply because this is under ecology. I am taking ecology before when I was still in college for around 2 semesters. But you're taking this in one module. See? So this is quite long. Okay? Conservation of biodiversity is essential to the continued stability of the ecosystem. Disturbances can happen to any ecosystem, but an ecosystem must still be able to overcome such and continue with its important and essential life processes. Diversity and survival. Okay? In an ecosystem, there are various interactions between species that contribute to the structure of the community. This interaction may be categorized into 4 types. Okay, we have 4 interactions in an ecosystem. We have competition, predation, herbivory, and symbiosis. Again, four interactions in an ecosystem. We have competition, predation, herbivory, and symbiosis or symbiotic relationship. Let's tackle first competition. Okay, imagine a garden. If that's taken care of, your plants will experience competition. They will compete. Weeds are one of the most common garden pests. They compete with the nutrients and space. And if not controlled, weeds will eventually take over the entire garden. That's under competition. In animals also, we have a lot of competition, especially if the source of food is only one, or that the source of food there is the same with the other organisms. Competition happens. Therefore, as the population of weeds and garden plants increases in density, the competition for limited resources may slow down slow down the growth of the population of the other organism. If 2 species are competing for the same limited resources, the one that I'm telling you a while ago, the growth of one or both population may be inhibited. This is called interspecific competition. Interspecific meaning in the same species. Okay, they are competing for the same food. That is actually interspecific competition. J.F. Gause, a Russian ecologist, studied the effects of interspecific competition by conducting experiments of 2 species of paramecium. Okay, a paramecium is an animal. Okay, it is a microscopic animal. Okay, he cultured both protists. It is under kingdom Protista. Protists under controlled condition with the constant amount of food that was added every day. Then he then grew the 2 cultures separately. He observed that the population eventually leveled off, which apparently determined the carrying capacity. Okay, however, when Gauss cultured the 2 species together, one species dominated and the other was driven to extinction. He later concluded that the 2 species are so familiar that they compete for the same nutrients or needs. They cannot coexist. This is now interspecific competition. They compete for the same food. Okay, so tendency is the other organism will what? Will eventually grow, and the other will eventually what? Extinct in the process because of competition. This is because one species will learn how to use the limited resources more efficiently and reproduce at a faster rate compared to the other, eventually leading to the demise of the inferior species. This idea was eventually dubbed the competitive exclusion principle. Okay, because the other organism now has the ability, okay, has learned how to maximize the limited resources and reproduce faster. So tendency is the inferior species or the other species eventually extinct in the process. This competitive exclusion principle applies to the niche of certain species. Niche are the ecological what? Area, ecological nature. These are where the species are living. We call that as ecological niche. Okay? The term niche in ecology is defined as the role of the species in its community or the sum of total use of the biotic and abiotic resources in its habitat. This is now the habitat. The niche now are the habitat of organisms. Relating the niche concept to the competitive exclusion principle further validates that 2 species cannot coexist in a community that have identical niches. If they have the same niches, take note, if an organism has the same niches and they tend to have the same also need for need of nourishment or need for food, tendency is they cannot coexist. They will have what? They will have competition, and eventually the other organism will die. As simple as that. Will die and go to extinct. There are two possible outcomes that may arise when competition between species occur. First, the stronger and more efficient species will drive out the inferior species. That is actually survival of the fittest. Then the law of the theory of natural selection. Okay, the survival of the fittest. The survival of the strong, the elimination of the weak. Second, the more efficient species may be eventually evolve and adapt to a different ecological needs. Okay? The latter outcome opens the possibility of two similar species to coexist. This phenomenon is known as resource partitioning. Okay? Resource partitioning happens when there are some evolution of that particular species, okay, and can adapt to a different ecological needs or different environment. Okay. A good example of this is the warbler bird species who have been coexisted by utilizing different parts of the pine trees for food. Predation. This is common. Okay. In predation, another interaction among species is predation. Predation is a form of interaction in which one species, the predator kills and eats another species or the prey, okay, for food. Okay, since eating and survival are essential for reproductive success or the success of an organism, the adaptation of both prey and predator tend to refine through the natural selection. Okay, since the prey is being eaten by the predator, usually the prey has its own protection for the predator. Okay, let's take a look at this. Most of the predators feeding adaptation or adaptation are quite common and obvious. Okay, they have heightened senses that help them find the prey, and they have adaptations such as fangs, stingers, claws, teeth, okay, sharp teeth, or poison to help them subdue and catch the prey. Predators also mostly agile and fast. Okay, while some rely on ambush, adapting in their own environment to camouflage. These are the common way of the predators. Camouflage is one of the most common defense mechanism among or against predation. Okay, some lower organisms, well, not lower, but some prey, okay, organisms, they tend to have this mechanism. Okay, the camouflage. Okay, they look like leaves. They look like barks of the trees, just for the predator, not just for them to be protected. Okay. Other defenses that animals have are the mechanical defenses. This form of defense can be seen in the porcupine sharp quills, okay, the hard shells of the clams and oysters, and the thorns of the rose, or the thorns on a rose bush. Okay. Some animals have also chemical defenses, which include the poison, such as in the dart frog, the poison gland. Okay, they emit or they actually release this poison if they are touched. Okay, take note. Poison or dart frog has a large poison gland in their head area. Okay, they actually release that one if they are touched by anybody or touched by any organism. That is their protection. Mimicry also is a mode of protection of prey. In this form of adaptation, one species copies or mimics the appearance of another. Like for example, um, have you seen a bug which looks like a leaf, but it does move.